All right, guys, I think we're set. I haven't seen anyone else add. Sounds like everyone can hear me and see the slides. So if you can't, message in chat. There's two things that I want you guys to have as you're going through and working on things in class. One is to make sure that you have the chat window open. What I'll do is I'll kind of always be checking that. So if you see my eye gaze go to the right, it's because I have a second computer monitor set up there to see what's going on. I kind of have two things going on. So if you have a question and you're having a hard time getting it in, go ahead and pop it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. The other thing that you can do too is up in the more section, in the upper, or actually in the right upper corner, you'll see a thing called participants. If you click on that, you should have the ability, I believe if you just click on yourself, hang on a second, I'm doing it on my, you should have the ability to indicate if I should go faster, if I should go slower, to raise your hand, things like that. Are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so we are seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll keep an eye on that as well. If I get a little bit too fast, you're welcome to tell me. If I get a little too slow, you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to just jump in with the audio, so just unmute and jump in. You don't have to have video going on. That's more than fine, I know. Some of you guys just kind of rolled out of bed. That's cool. But otherwise, that's kind of how I'll communicate a little bit back and forth.
Okay.
All right, so let's kind of get into a few things, kind of setting up the class, and then we'll get back into class content. And what I want to do is try to replicate the classroom as much as possible. So we'll get even more settled in with this. We'll get kind of used to it as we get going here. But that's kind of our goal. So we do have a few things that have changed for us. Okay, so, it's great to be back together. It's great to see you guys. Hopefully this brings some kind of normalcy to everyday life for you. I know that's kind of what it's doing for me. But as we get going, I want you to be clear that I understand this is kind of a small part of what's going on for everyone else. I know several of you have picked up more responsibilities because of what's going on. I know you're dealing with family and health issues, potentially, I want you to know that I'm mindful of that, what's going on there. And with that, my goal is to help you be successful, to get through this class, to do a nice job with it, but also to be respectful of the other things you have going on, and to be as helpful I can with those things as well. So I just want to make sure that you guys understood that I know the situation is going on for everyone, at least to some degree, of the things that you're doing, that, again, classwork is can't push that to the forefront with everything. As I was kind of driving at before, there's a few changes I want to make sure we talk about. First off, with class, as you know, everything is now virtual. So in fact, I was in the building yesterday just to pick up a few things, and it was so wild to think that there was all these classes going on, but no one was in the classroom actually learning. So it's kind of a totally different world going on now. We're going to do our meetings via Zoom. In terms of office hours, we'll do it through chat in Carmen. And then if we have more questions, I'll set up kind of a quick Zoom meeting with you. So that's how we'll do that. So everything now is virtual. It's the way we're going to do things, and it'll be kind of an interesting challenge for us. Lectures will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So there's two things with that. One is that this will give you the opportunity, if you miss a class, can't connect for some reason, you want to go back through and review something, those will all be posted to YouTube. You have to give me a little bit of time to get those up. The second thing too with that is just keep in mind that now everything that we're doing in our classroom is now kind of public record. So just be mindful of that, to the extent that you're careful what you're saying and things along those lines. But that's never really been a problem in our class, but I just want to make you aware of it. The other biggest class adjustment to the class for this one is we adjusted the syllabus to account for the new semester dates. So that is published, that is on Carmen. I believe I emailed it out to you guys, so keep an eye on those dates because they did change. Our final date did change. I'll be reminding you guys as we go along. The most immediate big one is that we have our first exam next Thursday, and I'll talk more about that. So let me get through the next slide, kind of talk about the last of the big changes, then I'll pause, see what questions you have, thinking like that. I know everyone's kind of working hard, balancing things out. So exams will be done as a take-home. The idea behind that is make it kind of more simple for you. You'll see that it will be very similar to how we've been doing it in class, with just kind of, in this case, you'll download the exam and then return an answer sheet. So will the written assignment. So in fact, we'll be working towards one of those this week. What we'll do is we'll work our way up to where we normally do that in class. Instead of actually doing the written assignment in class, you'll be given the opportunity to do it, and then I'll give you a date when those are due. And I'll make sure that that due date gives you a fair amount of time to actually get to getting that done. We won't make it too tight. One of the things I want to say with the written assignments is that they should be done in a similar fashion as if they're written in class. So they're not designed for you to take any longer. Sit down for 15, 20 minutes, which is what I normally give you guys, and answer the questions. So don't feel the need to now, write for an hour, something like that. We're making more out of it than really is needed just because you have it as a take home. Really kind of keep it nice and concise as we've been doing. So with that being said, any kind of immediate questions, things that are popping up as we talk about kind of the bigger changes of class, just kind of reviewing these things. You good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so perfect. So you can chime back with saying that. You can put something in chat. You can respond with the participants by saying yes. Things like that. I'll have all kinds of ways of getting feedback. So to kind of practice with things, get us used to kind of communicating a little bit differently here. What I want you to do is indicate something. You can write this in the group chat. What's been an interesting change for you caused by the COVID virus? So what's something interesting that's happened to you that's kind of changed the way that you're doing things? And I want you to go ahead and just kind of practice with this with chatting in the chat window with this. So while you're doing that, while you're thinking it, I'll say it's one of the small fun things that's happened to this is that I had a hugely messy desk for the last 6 years, and I finally had to clean it. I finally have a very, very clean desk, and my daughter and wife are very surprised when they walk into my office. So that is one change that I've had. I love it. I can't find toilet paper. Everyone's having that problem. Working out at the gym. I'm sorry for the RAs. I know that was tough for everyone. To lose jobs, that was a big concern the psych department had for their lab monitors as well. So many of you guys are like hitting all kinds of other responsibilities. It's really tough. Yeah, you guys, a lot of different changes, kind of looking at the chats, looking at all kinds of things that you've had to do. Yeah, if someone else has cleaned their office. What you guys can't see is the mess on the floor. That's the next step. Yeah, not being able to see grandparents. So Evie cracked me up. We let her do a video call with Nana and Grandpa, and she just like talked their ear off and like went around the whole house with them, showing everything going on. It was hysterical. She must have talked to them like a half an hour. Normally she's like bye. She was missing that connection. How was the grocery store situation? Bad, good, improving?
Horrible. So my boyfriend actually works at Giant Eagle, and he, oh my gosh, every morning they are just wiped clean.
Really?
Yeah. And they said that their warehouses are almost completely empty just because of how many people are coming to buy stuff every morning. Yeah,
unfortunately, I'm not surprised to hear that. I know, like in Arizona, in fact, they've had the National Guard come out to help restock grocery stores.
Right.
They're so far behind. Yeah, you guys are all saying that. Those are lots of guys working in grocery stores. So Hunter, I see you saying worked at Target, everything gets wiped out. I could believe it. I could believe it. Man, there's just a lot of things going on, and I just want you guys to kind of be aware to know that I know that stuff's going on, that you guys are having to kind of manage these things. Stuff's not in the grocery store. We'll try to make sure that we balance that out with classwork and things like that. So it looks like we're in great shape, guys, with using the group chat. If you want, just go ahead and unmute if you're muted right now and jump in and respond to questions. I'm going to keep asking questions as we go along. You guys do a great job participating. And so I want to keep doing that as well. But before we move forward, just want to check to see if there's any kind of last questions, things I can help with in terms of setting up the class, concerns that you have. Otherwise, we're going to get back to normal, start getting into content. So any kind of last questions or concerns? Right. I think we're looking good, but go ahead at all points, jump in the chat and, respond to stuff. So let's go ahead and see if we can remember where we're at. Keep in mind that we have not met in nearly 20 days, which seems really remarkable to me. And now we're meeting virtually. So this is really kind of big, different moment for us. And where we left off in class on March 5th, way back when, was talking about persuasion. And that's where we're going to pick up. And in fact, we're going to start to get into some of my favorite content of the class. So maybe it's kind of good timing for us. And when we talked about persuasion, we were talking about this idea of, you can make offers people can't refuse, kind of a little bit more like making people obedient to you, and talking about Jedi mind tricks. So going all the way back when. And actually today we'll start to get into some of these kind of Jedi mind trick like approaches to influencing others. But ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to persuade others to change their attitude, to kind of get them to think in a different way, to get them potentially, because they're thinking of a different way, to behave a different way. And I think you're going to see tons of things that we're talking about in this class start to immediately become relevant to the COVID virus. And that's something I want you guys to see, especially the social psychology class, to make that connection, to understand what's going on in our world, how social psychology is an influence. So while it's a horrible thing to go through for social psychologists, this is a hugely interesting experience to see how we're trying to change attitudes, groups behavior, and things like that. So we're going to highlight that a little bit as we get started here. So this is kind of where we were before, kind of reviewing a few things. One of the things we talked about too, is we talked about persuasion, is the general idea of social influence. And here we're talking about people affecting other people. So we're trying to understand how we're going to influence others, how we're going to change their behaviors, their affect, their cognition. Again, those ABCs is social psychology: affect, behavior, and cognition. And when we talk about defining it, one of the things we're going to talk about is some specifics of social influence. So we're going to kind of just remind ourselves of kind of what's going on here. The first of these is that social inhibition. Okay, so in this case, you're going to stop doing something you normally do because others are present. And the classic example of this is that, you know, you're singing in your car, you pull up to a stoplight, you notice the other person's watching you, and you stop. I remember being a younger kid, and I was at a Blackhawks game in Chicago, and I was dancing, and, you know, someone, you know, some kind of mom in the back said, shake it, and that's immediately when I stopped dancing. As a kid, all of a sudden I recognized, oh, you know, people are watching me, I don't want to get caught. And I remember just kind of being funny that that had happened. We see too that with social influence, we experience to some degree conformity. That's what we're kind of focused on a little bit more as we get started here. An idea behind conformity is doing what others are doing. And the idea here specifically is that with conformity, different from obedience, is that we're trying to get others to do things without directly telling them to. Okay, so we're not giving them commands that they have to adhere to, but rather we're trying to get them to kind of fit in with kind of larger norms, both normative influence and informational influence. You're trying to get others to do something without giving direct orders to them. And again, that's in contrast to obedience, where we're ordering others to behave in ways that they might not ordinarily do. So we're going to focus initially here on both looking at conformity, so getting others to kind of behave in a way that's consistent with what we're hoping for, and this idea of obedience. We're going to order others to behave in ways that they might not ordinarily do. And this is where I want to pause for a second, give you guys a chance to think about this. Where do we see some of the social inhibition, conformity, and obedience occurring as we're processing, as we're thinking about the coronavirus and trying to change people's behavior? So where do we see some social inhibition going on, conformity? You guys have kind of already talked about a little bit in your responses here. So how can we tie this slide already into what's going on around us? And again, you can jump in chat if you want to respond. You can unmute and just kind of share your thoughts, however you want to communicate.
Well, one example would be a lot of people going out and panic buying because they see other people doing it.
Okay, so which one do you think that would kind of fall under? The kind of conformity, maybe, the obedience? Which would you say?
Probably conformity.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think you're starting to see that you know, people are doing things like that. They're kind of binge shopping because others are doing it. No one's telling them to do that.
Right.
I think the obvious one is just the governor telling everybody just to stay inside, stay where you can, stop going to restaurants, stop kind of like living your normal lives. Is kind of under the obedience category.
Okay, so I think you're absolutely right. So obedience, you know, people are not normally going to behave this way. You know, we already said you guys would rather be hanging out in a classroom with me. You know, this is not an ordinary behavior to not go see your grandmother. So that obedience, doing things that you wouldn't normally do otherwise. I see kind of Cassie talking about conformity be that everyone is buying toilet paper because they're worried they won't be able to get it because others are buying it. So we'll talk about that as kind of a specific form of influence here in a little bit. So absolutely. Okay, other examples you guys can think of. I think I'll add, maybe as you're kind of putting last thoughts together, you know, you see tons of social inhibition, you know, so stopping doing things you wouldn't normally do because others are present. So you guys know I'm a runner. That's kind of the only time I end up getting out of the house. And I notice kind of myself behaving differently just as I'm walking by others or running by others, or I'm trying to like kind of get away from them or not be close to them. That's something I wouldn't normally do just because someone else is present. Okay, so, you know, avoiding crowds, you know, we're used to being in large groups. It's very weird for us to be, you know, just with family or just kind of on our own. I think that's probably the biggest adjustment. In fact, we launched some research related to that. So as we kind of keep going, you guys are doing a great job responding. I super appreciate it. We can also talk about this idea between kind of this acceptance versus compliance. So we can talk about this idea that we might have private acceptance. So genuine inner belief that others are correct. So we might say, yeah, you know, I do really believe that, you know, everyone should stay in their home and that we shouldn't have any contact with others. That's my true, genuine belief. And that's where, if you're trying to influence others, especially in terms of marketing, especially in terms of trying to get individuals to adhere to government policies to deal with the virus, you want people to have that private acceptance. But you also can see where individuals have this public compliance, where they're outwardly going along, but they're kind of maintaining a private inner belief that the group is wrong. So you might be having conversations with others where you kind of get the sense that maybe they're going along with, you know, staying in place, with not interacting with others, maintaining their distance. But in private, they might be saying, you know, this is totally ridiculous. This isn't needed. I actually was talking with my next door neighbor, Paul, about what was going on. And you could kind of see that as we talked about things, he kind of disagreed with me in different points. And I think he kind of pseudo-agreed because he wanted to make sure it was a pleasant interaction. But you kind of see he didn't necessarily, you know, privately accept things. He didn't kind of say, you know, believe what I was saying was kind of the correct way of doing it. There's a correct way of kind of processing and thinking about things. So that's, again, one of these pieces that we'll see as we go forward, is that individuals may privately accept the policies, the social distancing ideas, and that's where we really want individuals to be, because they're more likely to act on it versus that public compliance. They're kind of outwardly going along because they want to be part of the group, but, you know, they're really thinking that this really isn't a good policy. This really isn't the way that we're going. So with the last couple of slides up to this point, we've really kind of been just reviewing things a little bit, getting back to where we're at before. You know, I think that that's a good thing for us to do. It's been quite some time. What we're going to do now is we're going to start talking about normative influence, which will be our first kind of true topic for today's class. But again, wanted to spend some time making sure we're set with the tech and with getting going on the concepts here. So the first piece that we're going to talk about is this idea of normative influence. And again, with influence here, what we're doing is we're talking about changing people's behavior, not directly telling them that they have to change their behavior, but trying to steer them in a particular way that they are going to follow the behaviors of the group. And this particular study is a classic study. You guys know, anytime I say classic study, it's going to show up sometime later on. And it's a study done by Stanley Schachter in 1951, and it's formally or informally kind of known as the Johnny Rocco study. So let me give you kind of a little bit of fun background on it, and then we'll get into it itself. So Stanley Schachter is my great-great-great-grandfather academically. So each professor has an academic lineage. So he's my great-great-grandfather, and I, in fact, still do research related to his research. In this particular study, there's a Confederate who plays a different role. That's, in fact, Bib Latané. He's my great-great-grandfather academically. So kind of weird academic connection to the study. So nothing that you need to know, but I thought you'd find it kind of entertaining. And in this study, what they did is they set up this scenario where groups were going to be interacting over the course of several weeks. Okay, so something weird to think about now since we actually can't be in groups. But they're going to have conversation groups over the next couple of weeks. And in these conversation groups, they were talking about Johnny Rocco. Johnny Rocco was this kind of hypothetical delinquent kid who'd been getting in lots of trouble, causing problems, and they were supposed to discuss, at least in this first discussion group, what you should do with Johnny Rocco. How can you help him out so they can be a good kid? And usually the approach was that you should be kind of lenient with what's going on, try to guide him, help him reform. But what they did in this particular study is they had Bib Latané, the Confederate, have kind of either similar attitude towards the group or a different attitude towards the group. In the different attitude towards the group, basically Bib Latané, the Confederate, would say, no, you should lock him up. He's done. It's not worthwhile trying to help this kid. The best way to deal with him is just put him in jail. So that was one condition they had. So one condition was Bib Latané completely disagreeing with the group. The second condition they had was that Bib Latané went along with the group. So he basically agreed, said, hey, we should be really nice to this teenager. We should help reform him. And in a third condition, which we call the slider condition, in this case, what they said was, hey, he started off disagreeing, saying, hey, we should lock Johnny Rocco up. But by the end of the conversation, they went, by the end of the conversation, he went from saying, lock Johnny Rocco up to saying, no, we should rehabilitate him. He can be saved. In which condition do you think Bib Latané, the Confederate, was most likely to be rejected, to get kicked out of the group, when the group was then told, hey, we have too many people, one person has to be removed from the group? Funny how that scenario is set up. Which condition do you think they're most likely to get rid of Bib? To get rid of the Confederate, where he disagreed with the group the whole time, where he agreed with the group, or that slider condition? Okay, and in fact, I'll let you guys respond in chat. So let's get a couple responses, see if you guys are all in agreement. So which condition do you think he's most likely to have gotten kicked out? Okay, so again, we have our three conditions. He either disagreed with the group the whole time, agree with the group the whole time, or disagreed and then started to agree. Which condition do you think they're most likely to get rid of Bib Latané in this case? Okay, so the first couple of responses all saying when he disagreed with the group. So you guys have got it. That's exactly what happened. When Bib was disagreeing with the group, they got rid of him. Okay, so in fact, they said, hey, they don't want him to participate. They actually liked him the most when he disagreed at first, but then agreed later on. This study was actually replicated by Eric Wesselman, who also has Stanley Schechter, his great-great-great-grandfather, so continuing his great-great-grandfather's research. And we find that, in fact, this is a case where people, again, are going to go along with those norms because they want to fit in with the group. And again, no one's telling them that they have to, agree or disagree. Okay? So that's kind of one example of a normative influence study. Let me give you one or two others, and then I'll pause to pick up questions. Okay? So another classic study done related to conformity following group norms is was an Ash study on conformity. And in this study, what you'll see, and I'll show you just a short video clip on this in just a moment, is that participants were given kind of a very obvious task. And as part of this task, they heard the responses of other group members. And when they heard the responses of other group members, that influenced then their response. The responses of the other group members were to actually give an incorrect answer. So the question here was, what percent of the time is the participant likely to go along with the group and give an incorrect answer to a very obvious scenario where you should be able to easily get that answer? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the video. It should play for you guys. You should be able to hear it. If not, just send me a chat message quickly to make sure that I know. I'll also have the link for you, the video there. But I want you to watch the video and see where kind of this norm comes through. We'll talk a little about where the norm is occurring in this case. All right, just one second here. Hang on a second. Were you guys hearing the video?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, hang on. Let me fix that. Just a second, guys. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so Ross is saying you can't hear it. You guys can't hear it. Okay, hang on 2 seconds. Sorry, guys. This is something new I haven't gotten the chance to play with as much. Okay, one more time. If we can't get it this time, then we'll move on. Sound good? Okay, let's try this again. So if you can hear it, go ahead and type that you can once it gets playing.
Conformity is going along with the group, modeling your responses after what the group is doing exactly what the crowd, what everybody else is performing.
People today are generally considered more self-aware and sophisticated about the effects of social influence. But are they less subject to conformity? Dr. Pratt-Kennis decided to find out.
There will be a stimulus line over here on your left-hand side. And all you'll need to do is to pick which of these lines is the same as the stimulus line. And we'll go around in order, and all you need to do is state the number. We'll start with subject number 1. What is your response?
2.
Subject number 2.
2.
Subject number.
On the first 2 trials, the Confederates matched the stimulus line to the standard line, giving the right answer.
5.
2.
Subject number 6.
2.
Subject number 7.
2.
On the 3rd trial and thereafter, the Confederates give the obviously incorrect response.
1.
Subject 3.
1.
Subject 4.
1.
Subject 5.
1.
Subject 6.
2.
Subject 7.
1.
Subject 1.
2.
Subject 2.
2.
Subject 3.
As this subject hears the rest of the group give the wrong answer, he initially resists the influence of group pressure.
Subject 6. 1.
Most subjects start out defying the group, but after repeated trials, many of them begin to conform.
2.
Subject 4.
2.
Subject 5.
2.
Subject 6.
2.
Subject 7.
2.
Subject number 4, what is your response?
1.
Subject number 5.
1.
Subject number 6, your turn.
1.
Their voices may drop. They may know they're giving the wrong answers, but they eventually give in.
2.
All right. So what we see there, okay, so let me get us switched over to our slides again, just 1 second. All right, so what we see there is this basic idea that the participants went along with the norm. Okay, so they went along with the norm of giving that incorrect answer, even though it was obvious. And they saw that, kind of had pause. They were not quite sure how to respond, but they still went along with that group. And what we see is that individuals will go along with the crowd to be accepted. Okay, so we've all had that moment where we've agreed with the crowd, maybe again, not that private acceptance where you truly believe it, but maybe that public acceptance where you're just kind of agreeing with it so that you kind of fit in. And again, the idea behind this is that when individuals are deviant from a group and that deviance causes problems, they're going to likely then be kicked out of the group. And in Ash's study, as you were seeing, okay, we see that in conformity, so agreeing with the group, the participant giving that incorrect answer, increased with more Confederates. Okay, so in this study, or that example, I think you saw 5 or 6 Confederates. We see is that conformity, going along with the group, increased the more people were giving an incorrect answer, but only to a specific point. Okay, so it meant that just because you had more and more Confederates, more and more people giving an incorrect answer, didn't necessarily make it that much more likely that they were going to agree. Okay? We saw too that dissenters, reduced the conformity. Okay, so when individuals disagreed, it also made them less likely to then conform. Okay, so let me give you kind of 2 studies that give an example of this. Okay, some results to give an example of this. One is they did a study where they had participants look up. So how many of you have been maybe someplace else, maybe downtown, and you suddenly see like people looking up? Okay, so I used to work in downtown Chicago. I used to work in the shadows of the Hancock Tower, and it was always so funny because people would look at it, and as I was walking down the street, I'd always find myself looking up, even though I already knew what was going on. I knew where we're at. So they basically did a study where they took advantage of this. And what they found in their study looking at this conformity study is that people are more likely to comply. Okay, so you see this increasing here. Okay. As you added more people looking up, as you added more Confederates in that group looking up, but it eventually leveled out at about 5 people. Okay, so basically what it's saying here is that once you get to about 5 people, you start to see that impact of any individual starts to kind of weaken. They have less of this kind of impact on influencing that person to start looking up. So the idea here is it's not a perfect match where you keep adding more and more people. There's an increase in conformity. But once you get to approximately about 5 or 6 people in a group, you start to see that conformity levels off. That's where you might have even seen in our video, that's about how many people they had. So we see in one case that group size will influence conformity. Okay? We also see that we can have things happen when you add one dissenter. When you add just one person who disagrees, what do you think the participants do? Okay, so what would you think would happen if you were in this situation and at least one group member gave the correct answer instead of incorrect answer? What do you think participants did? Okay, so you can respond with the mic, you can respond over chat. What do you think participants did when there's just one person who disagreed? Okay, so began to question it, maybe said they kept going with the majority of the group believe. Other responses you kind of think about this. Okay, so maybe kind of kicking the person out, again, kind of following kind of Schachter's research. Okay, other thoughts is what happened for that participant when they just saw one person disagree? Okay, so watch the one that disagreed more. Okay, so kind of focusing on that person who's disagreeing. And kind of building on what you guys are saying, you have the right idea here. So they start to adjust their behavior. And basically we find through this kind of graph that I'm sharing here is that there's the effects of unanimity on conformity. When there was a unanimous majority, we saw over the trials that the participant was more likely to go ahead and agree with that group. But when they added just one dissenter, so just one other person who's also disagreeing, you saw the compliance, the following that norm, go down by quite a bit. Okay, even kind of more than half in this case. And so all it took was one other person to kind of form kind of a smaller group within that larger group to then cause the participant to start giving the correct answer to disagree with the rest of the group. Okay, so the idea here is that now that there was someone else that they could connect with, they weren't worried about kind of being kicked out of the group, not having a group to be part of. Okay, so we can again see that we're likely to follow group norms to fit in. But if there's even just one person who disagrees, we're then likely to say, well, hey, that's okay. We're going to then go ahead and follow that one person. We're going to give our true belief. So far, we've really kind of talked about norms. We can think about norms right now of kind of establishing a norm of that social distance. So even when I was still on campus a little bit over spring break, I was talking with someone else, and I saw it was really kind of interesting that the norm of that social distancing was there. Usually, my friend and I are kind of quick to give high fives, you know, have a kind of normal conversation. Instead, there was no high five. We were kind of standing some distance away. Someone needed to pass between us, and he was like, gentlemen, I need 6 feet. So we both had no problem kind of following this new norm of actually kind of going to different sides of the hallway to make sure that we could give him space to kind of pass through. Again, this idea we're kind of following these norms because we want to fit in. We want to be part of that larger group. Okay. So I'm going to pause at this point to see what you guys see what questions you might have in terms of norms and kind of the material that we've covered. So let me pause just a moment, because then we're going to turn into our next kind of topic, which is going to be talking about obedience. So I'll make sure that we're set here first before going forward. So I'll give you guys a second to ask questions. If you're all set, you're welcome to kind of put that in the chat too, to say you're all good. Kind of just give me some feedback. Keep in mind, I can't see you guys, so I don't know if you're confused, if you're in good shape. So give me just a little bit of feedback there before we move on to our next one. All right, okay, keep kind of checking in. All right, looks like we're good. Again, pop in with questions at any point, even as we kind of move on, stuff like that. I want you guys to feel really, flexible in kind of how we're responding. Happy to go back if we need to. So seems like we're good here. Let's go ahead and talk about obedience. And this is something that will likely seem kind of familiar to you based on, intro to psychology class, but I want to review it in the context of social psychology here. One of the things that you're going to see it's a little bit different for us as we're doing this online is I'm going to have things kind of broken down in parts. The reason why I'm going to do this is that it will be helpful for going on YouTube. What I'm going to try to do is break down the lecture into smaller parts. So if something's less clear, you can kind of focus on that part rather than going through the whole video. So I'm going to pause here for just a second because it'll help with editing later. And then we'll go ahead and delve into this one.